hey, it's Emily, and this is going to be the start of another reading vlog where I'm basically going to be binging another series. I guess I've just been in the mood to binge series recently. And so I have rented an Airbnb, not for this coming weekend, but for the next weekend. It is my lunch break. I'm taking a quick second on lunch to start this vlog, and it's the second to last day of March. So I have about a week and a half until I'm at this Airbnb, and my goal is to binge the ACOTAR series by Sarah J. Maas, and this will not include A Court of Silver Flames unless I just really decide I want to purchase the Kindle version of A Court of Silver Flames and continue on with this vlog. I only have the first 3 books in the novella on Kindle, so they were on sale as A Court of Silver Flames was coming out. And of course I heard a bunch about A Court of Silver Flames, and there's been a lot of hype and discussion about this series recently. So I've just been curious, and I snagged them on Kindle when they were on sale. And so I just want to read it. I just want to see what I think about this series, just have a little bit of fun with the fun fantasy romance. So that's the goal for this. And I need to start a little bit early because I know there's no way. I have the Airbnb later in the day on Friday, and I leave before midday on Monday, so I have less than 72 hours at this Airbnb, and there's no way I'm going to be able to binge this entire series during that period. So I'm starting a little bit early. I'm hoping that I can finish A Court of Thorns and Roses and be partway, a good chunk into the second book when I get to the Airbnb, finish the second book, finish the third book, and then hopefully also be able to get to the novella, but at the very least finish the second and third books, maybe get to the novella right after I'm at this Airbnb. We'll see. And so I want to be able to binge a good chunk of it there. But A Court of Silver Flames was not on sale on Kindle, so I just have the first part of this series. So again, I will not be including that unless I just decide I really want to. We'll see. So I have started A Court of Thorns and Roses, so I just wanted to give a few quick first impressions, and then I will check in more when I have a little bit more time. But basically this series is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, or at least that's kind of the setup premise here. We follow Feyre, who is a human, and they're also Fae in this world. They kind of live in separate areas. There's a huge history between humans and Fae, and that's described a little bit, and I'm halfway through ACOTAR, if I didn't mention that. So that's kind of where I'm at this point. So you have some history that's described, and there's a lot that's in the past gone on between humans and Fae in this world. And Feyre, her mother is dead, and her promise to her mother as she was dying was that she would take care of her family, her 2 sisters and her father. And her family, or the rest of her family outside of her mother, doesn't really treat her very well at all. And so her promise to her mother to take care of her family is kind of what she's holding on to at this point. And she is hunting for her family and kills a wolf in the forest. Turns out it's not a wolf, it's a Fae. So she's killed a powerful Fae, and when she's back home at some point later, a Fae comes to her house, and there's been a treaty between humans and Fae, and he essentially says, you've killed a powerful Fae, you need to either be killed or you need to come back to the Fae lands with me, and you need to stay there. And so she decides to go back with him, and she's living at his estate essentially in the Fae lands. And yeah, it turns out the person who has taken her back is a High Lord of one of the Fae courts, and so she's living on his property, doesn't really know what to do with herself. And yeah, so that's kind of the basic setup, and pretty typical standard feeling YA so far. I'm not really finding anything particularly special about it, but it is, you know, entertaining enough. I'm having a good time reading it. Feyre seems like a pretty typical YA protagonist at this point. She is someone who has hunted and taken care of her family and is sold as like a pretty cutthroat person, but that only kind of comes through, or has come through so far in her character, and I'm sure she'll develop over the course of the series. But really her her character at this point is just trying to get back to her family, or trying to make sure that her family is protected and taken care of, and not really knowing what to do with herself, and not really knowing who she can trust, and trying to figure out whether or not she can trust the High Fae or High Lord Fae person, Tamlin, who is the one who runs the estate and took her back with him. He also has some advisors around him. So she's just not really sure who to trust and what to do with herself. She's made some pretty poor decisions, and I'll talk more about that later. By the way, this is going to be mostly non-spoiler, because I figure, but there will be spoilers. I feel like I'm going to want to talk about some spoilery things, but I will make sure that there's a warning and a label on the screen somewhere in case you don't want spoilers. But I figure a good chunk of people who might find their way to this vlog have either read the series and just enjoy hearing content about it, or perhaps are interested and want to see if it's for them. But you know, there are some people who are interested in reading it and haven't read it yet. I mean, I'm only just now reading it. But you know, there might also be some people who aren't interested but still enjoy hearing some thoughts about it, but don't really care about there being spoilers, whatever. Anyway, so it'll be a mix, mostly non-spoiler with some spoiler sections. This is a warning. So I'll talk more about some interesting things about Feyre's decisions later. The world building is kind of there. I mean, she's kind of confined, so you're only seeing a little bit of where she's from and a little bit around his estate. And I'm guessing the world is going to open up a bit in future books, but the world building so far is, I mean, I can only kind of picture parts of what's going on, if that makes sense. Anyway, but it's still been entertaining enough so far. I'm still enjoying reading it at this point. Anyway, I will check back in later. Oh hey, it is Saturday, April 10th. I'm at the Airbnb. I meant to check in way earlier as I was in the process of reading ACOTAR, or maybe after I had finished ACOTAR. I did finish it a little bit earlier this week, and I did start ACOMAF, but I didn't get terribly far in. I was 25-30 pages in or something when I got to the Airbnb, so I meant to be farther into ACOMAF, so we'll see how this goes. But it is currently Saturday. It's around 2 in the afternoon. I got here yesterday and just, you know, unpacked, chilled for a little while. I definitely got a lot of reading in yesterday. Also just curled up and watched Pirates of the Caribbean, not gonna lie. And this morning I just had a chill morning and did read some. I also chatted with Kim from Expedition Through Pages, which was absolutely delightful, and got a little bit more reading done. But it's been a chill day here so far, and I'm about, I think, 175, maybe a bit more pages into ACOMAF at this point. But I wanted to wrap up my thoughts about ACOTAR. I think I set everything up, or kind of gave the main overall setup of the book in the intro clip. So I'm going to just give some impressions and talk about a few spoilery things, but again, I'll clearly warn about that. But first, some of the non-spoiler impressions. Overall, pretty entertaining. This wasn't necessarily something that I wanted to super critically analyze, or, you know, find every potential plot hole or everything that, you know, I wanted basically to let Sarah J. Maas take me for a ride. Her writing is definitely a bit over the top, but honestly that was kind of what I wanted. I just wanted something slightly over the top, just fun. Maybe there's some things that don't make sense, but it's just an entertaining ride along the way. And I feel like that's what this was. And so if you like over the top writer that doesn't turn you off and you've been intrigued to try the series, so far it's been pretty entertaining for me. And yeah, so I had talked a little bit about Feyre as a character, and her, part of why she is the way she is kind of her upbringing and her family, you know, starving quite a few times, or, you know, having a very difficult time finding food, and her needing to basically help make sure that her family is alive and hunt for them and just kind of keep them alive. And she's as a result, she's definitely a very stubborn character, because she's had to be to survive, and to some degree selfish again because she's had to be, and really independent, but she's also at the same time kind of loyal to a fault in some ways. So she's loyal to a family that doesn't treat her very well. She's loyal, but also a pretty independent character who's had to do a lot to survive. So that was a pretty interesting dynamic. She could definitely be pretty rash and strong-willed sometimes, but in a pretty entertaining way. I think the world building, I think I mentioned this a little bit, the world building is kind of so-so in this one because you only get to see so many parts of this world, and so the world building wasn't something that drew me in a lot in this one. You only see a few very select places, I guess I'll say, in this world in the first book, and so there's not really much of a world built to kind of cling to. There's not a lot of world development in the first one, I guess I'll say, in part because Feyre is just very sheltered for a good chunk of this book, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the spoiler section, but she's pretty sheltered for good chunks of this book from certain things, and so it's difficult to develop a world in that case. And there's definitely some telling versus showing with some of the character work and some of the world building that's going on, which isn't my favorite, but again, I'll talk a little bit about that more in the spoiler section. And the villain is pretty, once things get going, it takes a while for things to really get going. I was halfway through when I first checked in, and I still felt like things had only kind of been moving a little bit outside of the first initial set of events that took Feyre to the Fae realm. Things had only kind of sort of developed since then, and so I think there's a lot that's kind of pushed into the last part of the book, and in order to facilitate that, there's some telling to kind of just make that happen quickly and then move on, rather than her finding out some things throughout the story as she's exploring the Fae realm. So my preference usually is that there's kind of some exploration. You're learning little nuggets along the way as the characters are learning them, rather than being told by a side character a bunch of major things about the world. Anyway, and as I said, the villain is pretty cookie cutter, which is fine. You need a villain, and they're just kind of a standard cookie cutter villain. There's not much there, I think, but still overall pretty entertaining. I still had a fun time reading it, and I still wanted to figure out what was going on with Feyre. I wanted to figure out what was going on in the realm, and once things started happening, I wanted to see how Feyre would get out of those situations. So overall entertaining ride, nothing particularly special, but still fun for me. So I'll go into a little bit of a spoiler chat, just a little bit, to say a few things, and then I'll talk a little bit about ACOTAR. So I'll put a spoiler warning here, so skip ahead. I'll try to also put a timestamp of when I stop talking about spoilers so that you can skip ahead to a specific timestamp, but I'll put that here. It's definitely interesting to try to follow some of Feyre's decision making. She has a strong character, and I do overall like her. Again, she's very rash and stubborn and strong-willed and loyal to certain people that maybe she shouldn't be to a fault. But she is explicitly told certain things are dangerous, or that she needs to be careful, that she can't trust her senses. So going after what appears to be her father, or trapping dangerous creatures in the forest, or going out to that where they tell her stay in for this ceremony, it's dangerous. You do not want to be there. You do not want to see what happens. I will not be able to protect you. I'm dangerous in this ceremony once things get started. And she's still, no, it's kind of funny because it's within the same page, basically, like one section break apart, where she's like, yeah, I know it would be a really dumb decision to go to this ceremony and see what's going on. And it's so funny because then there's a page break and then she's like, so I decided to go to this ceremony to see what was going on. And it's like, why would you do that? But you know, sometimes characters need to make dumb decisions in order to let you see other things that are going on in the world, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, but that was kind of funny. And yeah, as I mentioned, I didn't particularly, so it seemed to kind of drag. So the part where she's in the spring court and she's just kind of hanging out to kill time and she doesn't really know where she can go or what she can do. You know, I think that part dragged on a little bit too long before Tamlin comes back and says, hey, it's dangerous, you need to go back to your family. And then she eventually comes back to find him. And then is it Alice that talks to her about what's going on? And she basically just says this was the curse. And I know part of it is like we weren't allowed to talk about it. So, you know, she kind of had to just get it out there once she could talk about it. But it was a little bit frustrating to have her just say the entirety of what the curse was and like really shift the entire perspective of what had been going on so quickly and just have one conversation with the character, set that up, and then change the course of the rest of the book. I'm like, I usually prefer her to the main character, in this case Farah, but I usually like main characters in these situations to investigate or find things out about the world, to build that world slowly but surely as they learn more nuggets, even if it's just they find some different things that are suspicious and they're starting to put some pieces together, and maybe there's a conversation that really puts all the pieces together in a new way. But I still like there to be some things they start to find out instead of just one character says, here's what it is, here's the world, here's the curse. Anyway, and then, you know, as I said, she gets, you know, and of course she goes into danger to find Tamlin and has, oh, and another interesting decision that she probably shouldn't or should have thought that this was dangerous was giving them the real name of someone that she knew when clearly they were dangerous people that she was dealing with. Anyway, but you know, and then she's in the mountain, you know, being tortured, and I don't know, sometimes I like trials and a character needing to go through certain trials in order to achieve some outcome, but it was just crammed into such a small part. Like, it didn't seem like a huge part of the story. It just seemed kind of thrown in there from a cookie cutter villain who was like, you must complete these trials just because we need a plot. And you know, some of the trials happen or are over very quickly, and the rest of what's going on is her, you know, being in captivity, trying to survive and being drugged and, you know, just trying to hold herself together until she can hopefully escape after completing these trials. But it just seemed like something needed to happen, and so they kind of threw in a set of trials. But anyway, okay, that's it with the spoilers. But again, even despite some of the things that weren't my favorite devices or my favorite techniques to move plots along or to build worlds, I still, again, as I said, had a really fun time with this one. So I'm now into ACOMAF and actually really enjoying it so far, and I have heard enough people talk about this series to feel like I've heard quite a few people say ACOMAF is where it's at. The first one is a bit weaker, third one is okay. So I have heard that this one is potentially quite a few people's favorite in this series. Will it be that way for me? Who knows? But I am really actually enjoying ACOMAF so far. I like that we're seeing more parts of the world. I like that Farah knows a bit more about, I'll say Farah knows a little bit more about who she is, and she's a little bit more oriented to, you know, what she wants to do in this world and, you know, what she can do to protect people. So she's figuring things out. She's still learning a lot, but I feel like she has a better sense of herself in this story now that she knows some more about the Fae realm. But I like that we're getting to see more parts of the world and getting to meet new characters. And yeah, I'm enjoying the, I'll just say she's going back and forth between a couple of places for reasons. And so it's definitely interesting to see her go back and forth and kind of see some of the contrast between the two places and how that's shifting her thinking in the story. But, you know, I'm having an entertaining time reading it so far. So I'm going to get back to it, and I will check back in once I've read more of ACOTAR. I'm hoping that I can, I don't know if it is 600 pages, so I don't know if I'll finish it today. But the audiobooks are in script, so I think at the very least, even if I only listen to one, I'll probably try to listen to ACOTAR on audio, and I'll probably just keep going with ACOTAR on Kindle, and then maybe listen and read on Kindle for the next one. But hopefully I can at least help get that one read a little bit faster tomorrow, since I'll also have the audiobook. We'll see. Anyway, I will check in later. So it is Monday morning, April 12th, and I'm about to check out of the Airbnb, so I'm gonna give a quick update of what's going on. So I did in fact finish ACOTAR. So I got to about halfway through on Saturday. I was chatting with someone on Saturday night, but I did manage to get halfway through in between when I last checked in and Saturday night, and then just spent yesterday just reading. I also went on a hike yesterday. I didn't get any footage of that, but I went on a hike yesterday and just had a nice chill day, and I did manage to finish ACOTAR last night. I meant to check in before finishing it, but it just didn't happen. I really enjoyed ACOTAR actually. So I'll say some non-spoilery things first. It's gonna get more and more difficult to say non-spoilery things as the series goes on, I think. But I'm going to say some non-spoilery things and then a few spoilery things and go from there. So I think I mentioned this before, I really do like that we get to see different parts of the world as Farah's traveling to different parts of the world for plot reasons. So I do enjoy the new places we got to see. That was pretty cool. I think it definitely opened up the world quite a bit, which I was thinking would happen and hoping would happen, and did actually happen in this one. So I really enjoyed that. And I will say I definitely enjoyed the romantic tension, the build up in this one. I thought it was just really fun and entertaining. And of course there were a few weird things that needed to happen to push along a few of those moments. But you know, what do you expect? It's still just pretty over the top writing and pretty just over the top stuff going on and reactions to things, but it's still just fun. I think that's what I was looking for in this and what I thought I would get, and so that's kind of what I was expecting going in, and is what happened. So, you know, some weird things needed to happen to push along those moments to build the tension, but it was fine because it was still pretty entertaining. I do also like some of the found family aspects of this one, so I won't go into detail, but I do tend to really love found family in my fantasies and just in general, but like I do really love found family elements in my fantasies in particular, and so it was nice to see Farah grow some and, you know, have some of those found family elements as she's kind of coming into her own in this world. So I thought that was a lot of fun as well. I thought the pacing overall was pretty good. I think there were maybe a few things that could have been shortened or cut out or just tightened up a bit, but I thought the pacing overall was still pretty good. There are definitely a good chunk of faster moments and some slower moments exploring the world and getting to know some of the characters. So I thought it was a pretty good balance of those, and overall thought the pacing was pretty good, even if there were some moments that I felt like could have been cut or shortened. And yeah, I think those are most of the non-spoilery things. So I will once again put a spoiler warning here, as well as a time once I'm editing, a time that you can jump to or kind of skip to in order to avoid spoilers. So here's the warning. Spoilers. I'm gonna mention recent only in spoilers because it's, I mean, like, I knew, right, because of things that I had heard about the series going in, and even just, it's hard to avoid, right? It's hard to avoid knowing that Feyre and Rhysand are the ones that actually end up together and not Feyre and Tamlin. And so it was definitely interesting to read the first one knowing that there was going to be some sort of huge shift, and getting to meet Rhysand in the first one and throughout, like initially and throughout some of the latter parts of the first one. It's definitely interesting to read those and know that eventually things really turn around, and that's who Feyre ends up with. And so I only want to mention Rhysand in spoilers just in case. I don't know. I know I've seen some frustrations of people, and this also just happens even in fan merch. Like, for example, Fairy Loot sent out a bookmark that had Feyre and Rhysand on either side of a bookmark. So like, it's also just in fan merch and fan art. So like, it's hard to avoid, but there have been some frustrations of people reading the series and going like, it ruined some of the fun knowing that she wasn't going to be with Tamlin. Anyway. But I did really, as I said, I love their dynamic. Just the flirtation, just the build up and the tension was super fun. So I really enjoyed that. I really like Valeris, particularly in the settings. I thought it was a really cozy place, and I was like, I really want to visit there. Like, I would love to visit and hang out there. There also definitely were, so I tend to like this less in terms of plot development, where characters will find out a particular thing about the world and they know they need to accomplish a certain number of steps, and then they find out once they start to work on accomplishing those steps that there's another layer added, and like, oh, I guess now we need to do this and accomplish these set of steps, and then once they start to accomplish that, they're like, oh, I guess we need to go over here and do these set of steps to accomplish some things. And it definitely felt like that was what was happening. So I know there is kind of one overarching thing happening in this one, but sometimes if there are too many smaller quests that, you know, you find out one thing and that leads to another quest that leads to another quest that leads to another quest, sometimes it just feels like you're just kind of adding in just as much stuff as you can just to fill space, is sometimes how it feels. And I didn't particularly feel that in this one, but there is that technique used, I guess, of, you know, there's an overall thing they want to accomplish, but they go on kind of a bunch of different side quests in order to find out particular things or accomplish very specific things that are a subset of what they need to do. And like, it's still, for the most part, makes sense, but sometimes it just feels like, okay, now that we've accomplished something, we need like some other plot element. Okay, now all of a sudden we need to do this, and then the plot can move forward, kind of thing. It's just not my favorite style of going on and figuring out things about a fantasy world and solving a larger problem, I guess, but I don't know if that even makes sense. Anyway, and that did kind of happen in here, but it didn't, not too much. Like, it didn't really feel too disjointed. I guess it's sometimes how it can feel if that happens, of just like a bunch of random stuff that like kind of sort of ties together, but it can feel really disjointed if that happens too much. It didn't feel disjointed, but that definitely was an aspect of the storytelling that wasn't my favorite. But still, overall, I had such a fun time with this one. So back to non-spoilers, but as I was saying, overall I did have a ton of fun with this one, and I have started A Court of Wings and Ruin. I'm actually listening to that one on audio, so I'm only a few chapters in, and we're just kind of continuing where we left off. So I will show you a quick tour of this place because it's really, really cute and I want to remember it. And then I will just finish the last things of packing up and head out. But I will continue to check in on ACOTAR and A Court of Frost and Starlight as well, because I do want to read the novella. And I'll see if I want to continue with A Court of Silver Flames. I'll probably eventually read that, but I don't know if I'll necessarily feel like I have to read A Court of Silver Flames right now for this vlog. But who knows? As I mentioned first, quick tour of this place. So this is just the main entrance, and yeah, these chairs are so comfy. I was sitting in this one reading for substantial portions of the weekend, and they actually recline as well. They were so comfy. And there's just a little dining area and kitchen, and they do have a TV. I didn't actually, I think, turn on the TVs at all this weekend, but, and then just a really cute and colorful bedroom and the bathroom as well. That was pretty nice and spacious. So yeah. Okay, so it is a little bit later in the week. I have actually finished ACOTAR and overall had a really fun time with this series, and I think I definitely liked ACOMAF the most of the three of them. I don't know, there was just something about that one that was so much fun, and the entire series overall was pretty entertaining. I think I liked the first one the least, and then ACOTAR and then ACOMAF was definitely my favorite of the three. And I think I'll save, I said that I would probably also read the novella. I think honestly I will save the novella for Christmas and then continue with A Court of Silver Flames after I read the novella. So I'll take a pause on this series for a little while. I'm totally fine with doing that, and honestly probably the clips for this vlog are probably long enough already that I don't need to just add more and make it last even longer and make this vlog a million years long. So I'm just gonna read the novella later and just keep it to the trilogy for this reading vlog. But overall I had a really fun time with A Court of Wings and Ruin. I think I have relatively similar non-spoiler thoughts as with ACOMAF. So in this one the politics is coming to a head a bit more. So I think this second book really opened up the world and showed you what the rest of the conflict would look like. And it took a while. There were some pretty slow moments, and it took a while to build up to some of the culminating events. And so I again feel like there were some parts that could have been shortened or taken out or tightened a little bit, and it would take a lot to build to some particular moments, and then those moments would be resolved relatively quickly, and then you would find out a couple of the next things that needed to happen, and then it would take a while for them to figure out how they were going to accomplish those things, and then those things would be accomplished relatively quickly. But it also felt like, and that's kind of how it felt like, I guess, with some of the culminating events of some of these groups coming together to, you know, fight the evil force in the end once and for all. It felt like there would be a lot more to figure out before they could actually get to some of those moments, but then it would just all of a sudden, something would shift very, very quickly, and then they would all of a sudden be at some of those culminating events, I guess, or some of those would be right around the corner even though they thought they had more time, I guess. So it was kind of interesting and sometimes a little bit weird in terms of pacing. But I do still really enjoy some of these characters. I'm enjoying the world, and I really like some of the moments between the characters. I guess now that Feyre kind of has found some of her family and found where she belongs, that is less part of ACOTAR, which is one of my favorite things about ACOMAF. But she's already found her place, and now it's about her figuring out how she can, with her family, accomplish what they need to, I guess. So it's less about her personally finding herself and more, here's some of the political machinations between the courts, and they need to find some allies and kind of sort out some of the differences between them. And they start to, but it's about them needing to communicate and band together to fight the evil force. And so that's most of ACOTAR. So a few spoilery things, and again, I will put a warning here. It was so there, since the politics is picking up and it's clear that we're getting closer and closer to war, it was, of course there's a few battles throughout ACOTAR, and it was interesting to see those battles. One, I was a little disappointed to find that Farah took part in some of them and just watched others. I guess I was kind of expecting her and some of the other members of the Night Court to be more heavily involved in some of the hand-to-hand combat that we knew was going to be happening based on where things were going. Did anyone else feel that way? I was like, no, I want them to be in the thick of things instead of watching and feeling like they should do more. And I'm like, you know you can do more. You know some of what your powers are and what they can do, and you want to fight. You want to be able to help, and you've proven that you could be a huge asset. Like, I don't know, it was a little weird that she and some of the other women were on the sidelines as often as they were. But it also was weird to me that after some of these battle scenes, there were multiple battle scenes that were immediately followed by sex scenes, which is a little bizarre to me, but it is what it is. They, I guess, needed to find comfort in each other after a long day of battle. I found that a little bizarre. I also thought it was a little bizarre towards the end after Rhys dies and they're bringing him back to life, and I thought it was, who knows how it's just kind of, they do the same thing essentially that they did for Farah, and produce a light that represents or has some of their power in it, and all of the High Lords can put their power into him and bring him back to life. But they had said right before that that's not how it works for someone who's already a High Lord. They said that there was a difference between her being a human and them turning her into a Fae, but that it wouldn't work like it did for her. But then it immediately, after they said that, they tried, and it did work, and I'm not sure if they just was like, wouldn't they know how that works and know whether or not it should work, and then it just worked without a real explanation? I don't know. It was a little weird. So there were just a few things like that were a little bit weird, but I don't know. I wasn't going into this to like have it be 100% solid logic throughout the entire thing and have it be the best piece of literature ever produced. I just wanted a good time. I wanted a ride, and that's what I got. Honestly, it was just fun. It was entertaining. I liked being in this world, kind of once it opened up, and that really started in the second one, where you actually start to see more parts of this world. And so, it was cool to see those parts of the world. It was cool to meet some of these characters and get to know the people of the Night Court. But anyway, okay, so end spoiler section. But yeah, I guess that last part could have been in a non-spoiler section of just, it was a ride. It was a fun ride, and I enjoyed it. I overall enjoyed it, and honestly, I'm excited to read the novella and continue on in this series, and I'm excited that there's more to be written in this world. So, even if I'm not immediately going to jump into the rest of it, I'm excited. I'm excited that there's more and will continue to be more in this world, because I honestly just had an entertaining and fun time reading these books. Anyway, let me know what you think. Of course, I can completely understand a lot of the criticisms that I've seen of this series. They make complete sense. And I think if you are looking for a certain thing going in, at least for me, I think if I know and understand some of the criticisms going in and kind of know what to expect, and I think I kind of knew what I was getting into, at least that's my impression after having read the trilogy, is that I had a pretty decent idea of what I was getting into, what some people perceive the strengths and weaknesses of this series to be to help me manage my expectations of what I wanted to get out of this series, which was helpful because I knew what I wanted to get out of this series based on some of that feedback. And so when I was in the mood for something like that, that's a bit over the top, dramatic, you know, not always going to make sense, but sometimes things just happen. You know, sometimes you're in the mood for that, and I was, and I think I read it when I was in the correct mood for something like this, and I don't think I would have the same experience at all times reading this, which is fine. I think that's true of a lot of different things. You're gonna perceive them differently based on what you want to get out of your reading at any particular moment. So I think I went in with the right idea and had a good time. So thank you so much for watching. I'm going to stop rambling now. I'll be sure to leave my Twitter and Instagram link down below. That's where I like to hang out. I will also leave more resources for how you can support the Black Lives Matter movement, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.